Alright, welcome to the channel. So what I have in front of you today is the Medford knife and tool Praetorian Genesis G. Now Medford is a company I like to think I'm pretty familiar with. I've handled almost all their folders that they offer, and I have to say a lot of their knives are near misses for me. And that's just how I feel generally about the Praetorian line. It's their most well-known design, and the Genesis is the mid-size Praetorian. You have the Micro that's just a bit smaller than this one, and then you have the normal size Praetorian, which is just a bit bigger. After that, you have the Praetorian tie, which is like the normal size Praetorian, but just beefed up with like a thicker handle and blade stock. So about this design, visually, I just love it. It just has that big blade right there, a giant tanto, and it just feels so much bigger than the handle itself. So this one has been, so a normal steel that they go to is D2. This one's been upgraded to 3V, as you can tell by that 3 right next to your logo on the blade. So it's a big step up in steel, but 3V is just more prone to corrosion, and that's why I appreciate that they PVD coated this one for me. D2 is borderline stainless though, and 3V isn't actually too far off from D2 in terms of corrosion resistance, but the coating just means I don't need to think about it. It's not something I need to worry about. So most other knives use a flipper or a thumb stud or a spider hole to open the blade up. The Praetorians use a fuller, the one that you see right here. That's because they have a pretty positive detent. It takes a lot to shake the spring out. And this thing has a heavy blade too, so the detent's pretty strong on it. So what the fuller lets you do is it lets you start lower on the blade. You can put your thumb right here, and it gives you more leverage than if you had a thumb stud up here. Lets you break the detent, and then as you're opening it, your thumb naturally slides towards the side that's closer to the pivot, and it locks. So I like that they're doing their own thing, but to be honest, the fuller is a little bit awkward until you get used to it. It's somewhat shallow, and it's rounded too. So it's easy to slip off of it, and it's easy to mess up in the beginning, especially if you're not used to it. That said, this one does have the detent dialed in perfect, so you can actually flick it out too if you don't want to open it slowly. It's built well, and that's one of the things I can never fault a Medford for. Their build quality is always great. It's on par, if not better, than most companies out there right now, and their tolerances are Chris Reeve level at least, by my opinion. So the action's pretty smooth. There's no play on it at all when it's locked up. There's no up and down, there's no side to side. There's no side to side play even when the thing's unlocked. It's well built, and it just has a sound to it that inspires confidence. You can hear the lockup in a detent. It just sounds solid, and that's because it is. On top of that, they're even using an external stop pin setup too for even more strength. So it works as the closing stop pin as well. When you open it, engages up here against the frame. So when you go to unlock it, the detent ball hits the blade fairly early, right about right here. So by the time you do a normal closing, which is about over here, it's already past the detent ball, and you won't get that little hiccup from the blade tang hitting the detent ball halfway through. No issues with the centering either. It's pretty much dead center. It's hard to show with the black blade, but I'm going to try and get right there. I've never had any issues with a Medford, no serious issues at least. And from what I've heard, Medford's pretty good about taking care of you if there is an issue. I guess that brings us to a warranty. I don't think I can do a Medford review without at least mentioning it. So, here's my take and my opinion on it. So on paper, it seems like a strict set of rules set on what you can or can't do with your knife. And I know a lot of people get hung up over that because they're like, I bought the thing and I can't do what I want to do with it. And in some places, they get pretty much borderline offended by it. So I've actually not seen Medford use this warranty as a way of saying too bad, this is your problem now. You touched it with a tool or with oil or anything like that. I haven't really done anything along those lines from what I've seen. I think of it more as something written by Greg Medford when he's seen a couple of the pimp knives, some knives covered in oil, some of them that have just been messed up by customers returned to him. So he just wants to write something to discourage it. And I get it too, because he's the person who has to deal with it all in the end when it gets sent back to him. And in practice, I think they use it more as guidelines and disguise them as hard rules to keep people from doing stupid things. So basically what I'm trying to say is don't be an idiot, and Medford will warranty your knife for you, most likely. Plain and simple. That being said, we do need to talk about the pivot. So I like custom pivots. I think they really do add something to a knife, and they kind of make it something unique, something that's not really off the shelf. But I also think that makers should give you the tool for their custom pivots. If the knife never loosened up, I'd be much more okay with it, but I've had a handful of Medford pivots loosen up on me. It's a huge pain to get the thing back together without marring it up. You're looking at this thinking that it takes a normal spanner bit, but no. I have a spanner bit right here. This one should be the right size, but as you can see, it's mostly like a cutaway flathead. It's like a flathead where I take the middle part out. So that the little things that go into the pivot, those are actually square right there. This is round, and I've tried too. It won't actually fit this one. So what you need is a snake eye bit to fit this one, and finding it isn't always easy. The good thing is, at least you only need one if you do manage to find it, because it's the pivot is press fit into the lock side, so it won't spin. So it won't free spin on you at least. The thing is, I don't want to have to pay to mail a knife and wait just to have the pivot tightened by Medford. That's not something you should expect people to do. Now with that out of the way, I guess we'll move on to the handle. So a front side over here is a solid piece of orange G10. And that's also why this one's called the Praetorian Genesis G. If it was a Genesis T, it would be titanium. Overall, I think the G10's well done. It lightens up the knife quite a bit, and it's textured kind of like an Emerson. The lock side is PVD coated titanium, so it matches the blade. And the back spacer right here is uncoated, and it's made of hardened D2. And it's brought to a point at the end, enough for you to break glass, not enough for you to really hurt yourself by rubbing up against it. About the clip, this one is using Medford's popsicle clip, and I think it works well. There's good tension on this one, nice ramp. It slides into the pocket well, and it works in hand too. See, there's a bit of ramp right here, and it comes out of pocket pretty easily too. It won't rip up your pocket. In hand, it helps to fill out the palm right here, because the handle is smaller than the normal size Praetorian. So it's a welcome addition. The thing about carrying it though is it's going to be wide in pocket, kind of like a Spyderco Manix, but I think you pretty much know that if you're looking at getting a Praetorian. So clip is good, and it doesn't cause any hot spots on the frame. And I guess that brings us to ergonomics, and that's where I think this knife falls down hard. And that's a shame too, because I like a lot of what they're doing here. For starters, there's no dead space on this handle. And what I mean by dead space is there's no wasted space on it. Everything can be used in hand. It works in one grip or another. This part right here, where you see the blade kind of dropping off and the handle coming back up, that's just enough to fit a finger, and it fits it comfortably too. Back of the knife is okay too. It kind of comes up a little bit over here, so it's not going to come out of your pocket. The G10 kind of gives you a bit more grip as well, and there's jimping all around to help it stay in your hand. This part right here also means that everything up to the edge is usable too. You can choke all the way up here, so you're never going to be too far away from it. It's a pretty good edge as well. It has a hollow grind right here, so it's a little bit thinner behind the edge than you might imagine. And even though it doesn't 100% clear the plunge grind, it's still sharp at the very end as well. It just, the edge will widen up very slightly towards the last little bit. The problem is this cutout right here for the lock bar. This one right here in the G10. Having it means that the lock bar is more easily accessible and easier to unlock, even though it has a high lock bar tension, as you can probably hear in the D10. But it just doesn't work in hand. I generally like it when both sides of the frame are close to even. Something more like this, with your finger resting on it, is going to be a lot more comfortable than just having it resting on this raised part right here. Having it raised up means your finger is resting on a single thin piece of material, instead of that pressure being distributed between the two pieces of material back here. Even worse, there's a milled cutout on the inside of the lock bar, making it even thinner. So it feels even more uncomfortable in hand. I get why the cutout is there. Why the cutout is there. It helps you unlock the knife and it gives you a bit more to hold on to. But it just makes it even more uncomfortable. Then there's a smaller handle on the Genesis. You can't even choke back to avoid it. You actually can, but this isn't a natural grip for me for this knife. I wouldn't normally pick it up and use it this way. I would want to hold it up here or maybe choke up. And that's where this is a problem. They could have easily thinned this out right here, like just cut the block bar down or maybe not cut away to G10. And I think that would have made the knife much better. Maybe they could have done a bit of both, but it's a shame because it's the only hot spot on this knife and it's a pretty big one. It digs in hard in a saber grip right here because you're pushing down with your thumb and that pressure is being transferred right here into your finger. In a hammer grip, it's not nearly as bad, but you still do feel it. When you choke up and use that pseudo choil up there, it's still resting up against your middle finger, so then that becomes uncomfortable. And then if you ever decide to use it in a reverse grip, you still have it digging into your pinky right here. The only grip where it's good is actually the pinch grip right here, where you're not touching it at all, and it's actually pretty comfortable. And that's why I have to say this one's a near miss. It would be a very compelling design if they just fixed that one small thing. It's a great size, it's well built, and it's a knife that I'd be recommending if it would just work in hand. I can easily imagine how comfortable the thing would be without that little bit of material right there. If you just milled the thing down or just dremeled it or something like that. I also wish they would just include the tool for the pivot as well. Or only sold it at a reasonable price because it's hard to find a snake eye bit. I think they used to sell it as part of a multi-tool, but it was one of those titanium ones and they sold it for 100 something, so I wouldn't really call that a reasonable price. So I wanted this one to be my carry Praetorian, but it just bugs me too much to keep it around, even though it really is a great knife. And that's all I have for you on this one today. Take care.